Heyo, Greg Branos here for the Coachspeak Index. I can't get enough of that song, man. That is Sarah Rain of Los Angeles Power Disco singing "I've Gone Bad." Folks, I hope you like treats. I hope you like big treats, because I got one for you today. Had a fantastic conversation with Jacob Gibbs about players that we have changed our minds on. We're flip-flopping on the fantasy football beach on these players. Some players we were much higher on earlier in the draft season, now we're lower. And players that we were lower on early in the draft season, now we're higher. Was a very productive conversation, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. I also think you're really going to enjoy Underdog Fantasy. Got a QR code here in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen in the description. If you're an audio listener, gets you up to $1,000 in bonus cash plus a free pick'em. That's pretty cool. You can go draft a bunch of teams like I'm doing. You can do some pick'em stuff like I am also doing. I put one thing in the Discord already that I like for week 1. It was DeAndre Swift higher than 10.5 receiving yards. It's up to 11.5 receiving yards right now. Still like that. The Bears want to get him very involved in the passing game. And I think that happens quite a bit against a blitz-heavy Minnesota Vikings defense in week 1. All right, let's get to the show. Jacob Gibbs, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm psyched to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Dude, thanks for coming on. Really looking forward to this conversation on players that we have changed our minds on this draft season. We've kept an open mind. We're being malleable as we should be when priors change or new information comes about, and we recognize, hey, maybe I've been wrong on this player. Maybe I should be taking this player more. Maybe I should stop taking this player that I've been taking. And we'll start with you, Jacob. The first guy that you nominated is Ollie Gordon. Let's hear about this change of mind on Ollie Gordon.
Yeah, I think this is a really important discussion and topic. I think there's a lot of take lock and ego. It feels like, I don't want to say for sure what's going on, but it feels like a lot of like identifying with picks and bold calls and all this stuff. And then people get their heels dug in, and it's like, that's not really our job, right? Like, we're here to try to help people. We're here to try to like objectively quantify what we know, what we can speculate on with these players. And so I've tried to do better at that. I still am not the best at it, because my problem is I get super, super excited about what could be, and maybe don't see the downside risk so much. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. My first player is Ollie Gordon. It's been like snip, snap for me the whole way, like since I became aware of Ollie Gordon. So I don't watch any college football. My first exposure to him was just watching his 24 film. And it was not a fun watch, especially when we had so many awesome running backs in this class. It was easy for me to be like, I don't really think this is an NFL running back. This looks like a gross, like Najee Harris kind of running back to me. It felt like he was always trying to do too much and wasn't what I was expecting. That was part of it too, is like I had this preconceived notion that he was going to be like powerful and stuff. And then he was always trying to evade and make things happen. And then shout out to Ray GQ, I think, GQ. He does good work. And I saw he put an Ollie Gordon video out where he had like a ton of conviction. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you're just missing the context here. That team was a mess, that 24 team. I think they lost like 8 or 10 games straight at the end of the year. And I've like heard from people that they basically were like kind of giving up, which is a crazy, crazy place to find yourself when it comes to football.
Yeah.
And like to be the running back in that situation, like it does, maybe you do just fall into trying to play hero ball sometimes. And so the 23 film, obviously much better. And the preseason film has just been awesome. So like I got kind of back in after getting to the 23 film and looking at his data. His data, I classified the rookie running backs based off like not so much like talent or where I think they should go in fantasy or anything like that, but like what the roles could be in the NFL. And Ollie, I put into a group of like 4 guys where it's like, I think you might be able to run an offense through this guy. Like if he gets drafted to the Steelers or whatever, I could see them just like trying to run everything through and load him up. And that was because like when I dug into the data, everything backed that up. Pass blocking, 3-down roll, really seemed like he could be that kind of a bell cow. But then we get the 6th round draft capital. And so it's just like, what the, like, maybe the original take was right. Like if NFL teams looked at this guy and decided that he wasn't, worth, what we thought he was in 23, maybe that's meaningful. But I think that's another interesting point about this stacked class is like a lot of these guys fell because it was so deep, I think. And so I think it's important to maybe not stick to your priors on that too. Like if you have strong conviction about like what draft capital means, that might be a little bit different this year circumstantially. So now we've arrived in the preseason and Gordon looks fantastic. Like more than any player I've watched, he's making the most of his opportunities. And there's some ambiguity in terms of what's going on with the RB2 spot in Miami with Devon Achane. I would love to hear anything from you. Definitely value your insights there, but it feels like we're really steaming up to where he could play a meaningful role. And he's a big guy who can run between the tackles and has the creativity to create like some more explosive plays outside of the tackles as well, contributing the receiving game. And we know that the offense can be good. So really an intriguing late round guy. And, there's not very many late round running backs that have the upside to maybe become a part of their backfield or even contribute right away if he has the role over Jalen Wright there.
Yeah, I could definitely see him having RB2 role locked down right now over Jalen Wright. Mike McDaniel has said in press conferences, yeah, we'd like to see a little bit more out of Jalen Wright, a little bit more consistency. It's funny because Mike McDaniel, a lot of the times he'll just speak in these like long, ambiguous, cloudy ways about players, but when he speaks about Devon Achane, it's very specific and targeted, and we love Devon Achane. We are all about Devon Achane. Like he embodies what we want to be as a team, which really makes me think that when Devon Achane is healthy and active, it's going to be the Devon Achane show. Really, they're going to run it through him, whether the offensive line is good or bad. And I think he's one of the few players on this team who is kind of game script and even offensive line proof. Right, if the offensive line is good, then that efficiency that we saw, I think, in his rookie season could really help him pop off in a big way. A top 3 running back finish. And if it's bad, then I think we see what we saw last season with, okay, let's do a real quick, short passing game, get the ball out immediately to our playmakers. But like you said, man, Ollie Gordon looked really good in the preseason, and he looked miles better than Jalen Wright there. He has an ADP of 157 right now, which is very interesting because that's the range of a lot of these kind of handcuffs, like Tyler Algier. It's a little bit after Ray Davis, but kind of in the spot where Austin Eckler was going a little while ago.
I just saw him going around 9 to Dave Richard. So this is drafted the CBS experts, and Dave like goes to Miami's joint practices and is like kind of got feet on the ground there with the team.
Mm-hmm.
Took him in freaking round 9. So like, yeah, wow. I think he's pushing up.
I've seen him go, I think like 120 in some underdog drafts. I've seen people be very, very aggressive with him. I'm not sure. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around whether people are doing it because they think Devon Achane is going to miss time of, either week 1 with the calf, or that it'll be a lingering injury that will come back and he'll re-aggravate it. I'm a little scared of taking Ollie Gordon, in the range that he's going now, knowing that I just feel like if Achane is healthy, Gordon is not very involved. Now, he could win that goal line role. That's
Right.
a definite possibility, which would be big for Ollie Gordon. That would be a big negative for Devon Achane as well, if he's not able to get that. But I absolutely get the Ollie Gordon hype, because he looked good, and that's what you want when you're drafting. You want talent, right? You want to bet on talent. And very good points about the 2023 versus 2024 seasons that he had in college. That's, context that we're missing sometimes, and like you pointed out, getting that context can help us, readjust our priors, which were based on maybe incorrect information.
And even last year, Achane had 53% of the running back runs in his backfield. So that's like basically identical to Jahmyr Gibbs, like he gives up some work to somebody. Those are just running back runs. He had just barely over half.
Yeah. My next player that I've changed my mind on is also a big burly back. It's Braelon Allen of the New York Jets. And I mean, this is a guy who wasn't great last season, and surprisingly, the short yardage success rate wasn't as good for this guy that you would think it would be for such a big guy. And I was taking a lot of Breece Hall early in the draft season, just like it's a talent thing, right? I think Breece Hall is head and shoulders better than Braelon Allen, if not a full body length better than Braelon Allen. But the coaching staff and Aaron Glenn just keeps talking about Braelon Allen and also Isaiah Davis and this 1-2-3 punch, but mainly Breece Hall and Braelon Allen, right? He wants to run it through those two guys. He made the comparison to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, which, he was with Detroit the past few seasons, so he's very familiar with that type of backfield. But he keeps talking about Braelon Allen as this, 240-pound guy who's always falling forward, and saying, how good he is at short yardage. And I mean, if the metrics don't really bear that out, right? But if the coach sees it a different way than I see it, then what I think about it doesn't really matter, unless it's something where it leads to, several games into the season where there's still this bad success rate on short yardage, and they're saying, okay, he's not getting the yardage that he should be getting here, right? He's not getting his first downs. He's not getting into the end zone when we're at the goal line. Like, we need to switch it up a little bit. But for these coaches, right, like what they think is more important than what I think. So we've seen a lot of coaches have faith in players that they shouldn't have faith in, but they keep putting them out there because like they have this idea of this player, they've seen it in practice and whatever. So I'm trying to adjust now to what Aaron Glenn is saying, who comes off really, he's a first-year head coach. Don't have really sufficient data to judge him by,
right,
as far as reliability, but he definitely is coming off like very Dan Campbell straight shooter. Like,
right.
I'm gonna say what I feel. I'm gonna say what I believe, and you guys can deal with it in whatever way. And he just keeps talking up Braelon Allen. So I have no choice, but in these best ball drafts to just draft Braelon Allen. Right now his ADP is at 132. It's been going up, steadily throughout this offseason. I'm still taking him in that area, like I was in I think he was like in the 170s or 160s for a while, and just like slowly keeps climbing up. But I believe what Aaron Glenn is saying, that he really wants this kind of 1-2-3 punch with more emphasis on the 1-2 of Breece Hall and Braelon Allen. The Jets offense probably not going to be great, but they're designed to run the ball. That's what they want to do. They want to run it with Justin Fields and Breece Hall and Braelon Allen. They want to get Breece Hall involved in the passing game as well. And then we see the preseason usage, right? It's pretty much split between Breece Hall and Braelon Allen there. So that's a completely separate conversation about preseason usage. Some of these coaches were doing kind of a dress rehearsal for the regular season. Some were just going very vanilla. Some were doing personnel that they're not going to run during the regular season at the rate that they ran during the preseason. But I just kind of believe Aaron Glenn when he's talking about the faith that he has in Breece Hall and Braelon Allen. Do you have any Braelon Allen thoughts?
Yeah, he was on my list as well. He's kind of like Ollie Gordon. I don't think he's looked like, wow, this guy, like his film is just shocking me how good it is, like Gordon's preseason has been. But he's had better vision, I feel like, in navigating the blocking scheme there than Breece has, which has been disappointing because I think Breece is just like this, all worldly special talent. But I've watched every run for each of them in the preseason, and it's like, this could work. I could see if the Jets get into the season and they have a bully ball offensive line and they want to lean on defense and meanness, and that's their mentality. And they don't trust Breece. They don't trust Justin Fields. They just give a lot of work to Braelon Allen, who they've said all along they're going to give a lot of work to. So he's been moving up for me. He's kind of like Gordon, where it's like maybe early in the year you can use him if he's getting, goal line work and surprisingly getting, 10, 12 touches per game. And if something were to happen to the starter, then all of a sudden he's probably like a top 20 back.
Yeah, could see that. And I at one point I had, I think, like 27% Breece Hall, and then as Aaron Glenn just keeps talking it up, it's dropped a little bit more and a little bit more. Now Breece Hall has gotten to the point where he's going late 4th, early 5th, and definitely buying at that price in best ball, but still getting a lot of Braelon Allen, and I think it'll probably be pretty even exposure for me once I'm done with all of these drafts. Next player up for you, Jacob, is Tyler Warren. Tell us about Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren is another one who, when I turned on the film, I wasn't as impressed as I was expecting to be, because I had heard like Gronk comparisons and crap like that. It was like, he's Gronk, Loveland's Kelsey, like early on. And I watched him and I was like, I don't even think he's a better blocker than Loveland. And I definitely don't think he's a better like route runner and receiver. What stood out to me was he had freaking phenomenal hands, like so cool. And that's something that we've heard a ton of from the Colts in terms of what they like about him. And so I kind of had a tough time with him because when I dug into his data too, it wasn't like I'm real granular with it. So I'm like obsessed with per route data and all of that. And then even within the per route data, I'm trying to find, like turnover free stone to give context as to how they got to that number. And Loveland's per route data last year, and a terrible offense, was better than Warren's at a younger age. Was one of the most productive per route seasons we've ever seen it at tight end in the recent collegiate history, like 7 or 8 years of data I have. Warren's was good, but it was just this final year that it was good. And it was propped up by 24% of his targets coming on screens compared to 7% for Loveland. So that all gave me some pause. I have dug into it deeper and like done some things to try to like clean up yard per route run rate a little bit, like get rid of screens, get rid of sacks in plays where there's no target on the drop back. And still Warren's season looks good. I wondered if it would like drop in a significant way, but it's still like a really high yard per route run rate, even compared to some of the best tight end seasons we've had. So I do think that plus the draft capital, the prospect profile is there. I feel comfortable betting on it. I'm not like just totally enamored with him like I am with Colson Loveland. I have Loveland ranked ahead of Warren even now, even after all this steam and people think I'm insane. We're going to see. But I have been really encouraged this preseason. Everything seems to be going his way. He looks great out there. He looks the part. It's not just like catch and run stuff. Like he's getting open down the field, and that's really encouraging. And then, the move away from Anthony Richardson, I think, is only a good thing. So if I'm swinging at tight end and it's not one of the, I'm basically either it's like a barbell approach of going first or like last. I don't really care about anything in the middle. If I am getting something in the middle, which is kind of where Warren is pushing up to, I want it to be upside to be something that can be first. I don't know if we have that with Daniel Jones, but just from a talent perspective, like he does feel like he fits the bill of what could potentially give us a sneaky, like really productive tight end season. So I flipped on him. I had him at like tight end 14 way back in like June or something, and now I think he's up to tight end 7 or 8.
Yeah, I've been steadily getting higher on him throughout this offseason. The Colts, man. I don't know if there's any player that has been talked about more this offseason than the Colts have talked about Tyler Warren. And his hands that you mentioned are one of the biggest things that they keep talking about. Like unbelievable hands. Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter, general manager Chris Ballard said that he thought Tyler Warren had the best hands in the draft. Steichen talking about how he plays above the rim. They're saying how even when he's completely covered, he's still really wide open. We've seen the clips of him in training camp just making unreal catches there. Was going around like 120-ish or so on Underdog. He steamed up to 90th overall there now. And I think he's going to be just a pillar of this offense. And, you mentioned the screens that he saw in college. We saw that in the preseason. We saw him get targets across the middle. We saw him get these deep shots, a couple deep shots down each of the sidelines, which I thought was like very, very bullish because they're talking about using him in just so many different ways. And for well over a year, they've been talking about how much they want a wide tight end. Shane Steichen had worked with bell cow tight ends before with Antonio Gates when he was with the Chargers. And Chris Ballard was saying, like, we want a Jack Doyle type tight end here in Indianapolis. They missed out on Brock Bowers last year, who they really wanted. And this year they spend the 15th overall pick on Tyler Warren. And like they had big plans for a wide tight end before they even drafted Tyler Warren. And then they draft him and they're like, they could not be talking this guy up anymore. And it also gives kind of like Taysom Hill vibes, the way that they're talking about him, being able to work out of the backfield, as well as wide tight end, as well as being split out wide. I think we maybe see some tush push stuff from the Colts this year using Tyler Warren. They've also mentioned his background as a quarterback, so maybe we get like 1 or 2 passing touchdowns out of him this year. Yeah, I think he's going to be just such a huge part of this offense, and I wish he had a little bit better of a quarterback situation. But right, these are the same arguments that we made against Brock Bowers last year, who was going in this similar range here as well. It's a terrible offense. It's terrible quarterbacks, and Brock Bowers ends up just completely smashing. Now, Tyler Warren, not quite the prospect.
Not close, in my opinion. Not close.
Yeah, that Brock Bowers was. But I think he's going to be super, super involved in the offense this year. I'm very in on Tyler Warren.
If he gets the design stuff and gets some random rushing touchdowns and stuff, though, he could catch that kind of production, because like Bowers only had 7 touchdowns. If he gets 2 on the ground, like he's almost there, like he really doesn't have to do that much more receiving.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to be the Bowers level of receiver.
Yeah, it was really the deep shots in the preseason that kind of cemented for me, like, okay, I'm very, very big on Tyler Warren now, because I knew he was going to get that intermediate stuff. Seeing the design touches for him, the screens that they manufactured, like that's great, and it shows, okay, that they're not bullshitting around when they're talking about like, we want him to be super involved here. All right, my next player that I am now higher on is Matthew Golden, who has an ADP of 66 on Underdog. We
recency bias is such a big thing in fantasy football, and we look at what's been happening in the Green Bay offense now for the last 2 or 3 seasons or so of they don't have a wide receiver one. They distribute the ball. You don't want to draft a Green Bay Packers pass catcher because they will just disappoint you, especially if you're in a managed league. But what if the Packers using a first round draft pick on a wide receiver for the first time in 23 years is a sign that, hey, maybe we do want an actual wide receiver one. Maybe we do want an alpha in this offense. And Jacob, I think it was you who pointed out on Twitter, like what a great fit that Matthew Golden is in a Matt LaFleur offense with how he wins on horizontally breaking routes and how often Matt LaFleur employs horizontally breaking routes in his offense. And this is, I think Matthew Golden may be who the Packers like wish that Christian Watson was for them when they drafted him. He has the speed to like really burn you downfield. Also the speed and athleticism to be used in the run game a little bit on jet sweeps and what have you. And then, the speed and ability to take intermediate stuff and get like really big yak out of it. What's your temperature?
I also think he could be a big red zone winner, kind of like Watson, but in a much different way. I think his short area quickness and ability to get in and out of his cuts is going to make him like really lethal with somebody who can throw with anticipation. He needed that so bad when he watched his college film. He was often like getting open, but the throw wasn't there. It just wasn't. Or if it was there, it was behind him. He was waiting on it. And Love can do that. Love can make any throw on the field, will make any throw on the field, and can throw with anticipation and hit him right as he's coming out of those breaks. So I think he could be a weapon there. As far as the horizontally breaking stuff, I think that is really relevant. In 2024, these horizontally breaking routes were worth 23 more fantasy points and were 49% more likely to draw a target than vertically breaking routes. This is per fantasy points data. And so horizontally breaking routes, we're talking about, slants, ins, outs, anything that's, breaking that way and not like going down the field or coming back to the ball. Matt LaFleur better than anyone at designing these. If you look at this fantasy points data information, out of 124 qualified receivers, Romeo Doubs ranked 5th in route win rate on these routes, these horizontally breaking designs. Christian Watson was 7th. Dontavian Wicks was 12th. So that's 3 receivers that were 90th percentile or better in terms of the percentage of these horizontally breaking routes that they were winning. And Jaden Reed was 74th percentile. He wasn't far behind. So I think it's clearly a play designer stat. I love the route concepts that he dials up. And so if we get any increase in passing volume, I think it could be really big for Golden. And the main problem with Golden is like, can he draw targets? We didn't really see him do that in college. I think he landed in the perfect place for that to be like boosted. Maybe he isn't, if he was just, randomly on the Patriots or whatever, like he's not going to just go win as the wide receiver one all that often. But in this situation where the designer is like creating space intentionally with every single play, all he has to do is like beat one guy. And I think he can do that. I think he could do that repeatedly. So I'm with you on Golden. I wasn't super into him at first. I really liked his film, but I had some concerns the speed didn't show up in the way that it did in the testing, in terms of like beating people deep down the field. And then the data is like really, really like, it's really hard to wrap your head around the data. I did some digging and trying to contextualize and everything. I think it was mainly just, he came into a Texas team that was like wanting to prioritize, I'm blanking, Isaiah Bond. And so he was the wide receiver one at the beginning of the year. And then when he took over Golden, he became that player and was starting to get more and more targets. They also had Gunnar Helm, who I was just thinking to myself and laughing earlier. I didn't want to, there's no reason to bring it up into the conversation, but now we're here. Gunnar Helm legitimately is my vote for best hands, best ball winner, slam dunk guy in the class. He's really good at that stuff. He's really reliable. And Quinn Ewers knew, he'd been playing with for 3 years, that you can just throw the ball to that guy. He led the team in targets and receptions. So like that was also existing in the offense. And I think he probably would have been a higher pick if he didn't do his combine through a brutally injured ankle, Gunnar Helm. So like now we're just way off track. Sorry. But I do think all of that contributed to the golden numbers. So I'm willing to not just like write him off just because of the data and say that he's going to be bust. I'm at his price, especially. I'm definitely willing to take shots on him and see what we might have here.
Yeah, that the combination there of the talent that he brings with the opportunity that Matt LaFleur's offense provides for him, I think could result in a situation where, okay, Green Bay finally has a wide receiver one, and their general manager, Brian Gutekunst, before the NFL draft, back in like February or March, something like that, was talking about how like what we really need is a pass catcher who we can rely on third downs to move the sticks on these like third and like 3rd and 5 and whatever. And Matthew Golden seems like a perfect kind of guy to help them out in that area. Gunnar Helm, by the way, we saw those hands on display in the preseason. Made an incredible.
He's awesome.
Catch. Yeah, makes me a little bit scared of my Chig Okonkwo bags that I have.
Okonkwo's getting all the playing time, so it might not be ever amount to anything for Helm, but I do think that could be a good stylistic fit. But yeah, I legitimately had no idea who this was. I just go into watching his phone and I'm like, what am I watching? Like, he's great after the catch. He's hurdling guys. He's incredible at the catch point. Like, yeah, he's deceivingly athletic. Yeah, keep him on your radar if you're a deep sicko dynasty player like us.
Your next player that you are higher on now is Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah, I mean, this is a quick one. Like, it's just the perfect runway. Like, it couldn't have lined up better. And then I just will throw it to you. I'm sure people know already what you've talked about like the Coachspeak side of it. But I've literally never heard Todd Bowles speak like this about a rookie at any position. Do you have any data on that? Like, is this completely unprecedented as it feels?
Well, he was talking up Jalen McMillan quite a bit last season, and McMillan was dominating in camp. He had the injury during the season that derailed him a little bit, and they talked about how detrimental that is for a rookie, for during training camp or during kind of an earlier part of the season to be dealing with an injury because you're missing so much valuable time. But then when McMillan came back, like really hit in a big way for Tampa, and yeah, they love Egbuka. Their general manager Jason Light, after they drafted him, said, I think I would have thrown up if he was not available when we were picking, and I think it speaks volumes when a team has a lot of firepower, right? Is really stocked at a position, and they still use a draft pick on that position. Now there's the Chris Godwin stuff of who knows when he'll be back, but they did sign him to a long extension there. And they said this Egbuka pick, yeah, it's about the future, but it's also about now. Like, this dude can play, and he can play all three spots. They love having that kind of versatility in Tampa Bay in that offense. They have a new offensive coordinator in Josh Grizzard, but they have a lot of continuity on the staff. I believe Liam Cohen is the only one from the offensive staff who left, and Grizzard said, yeah, we're going to keep it pretty much the same here. Like, it worked really well last year, so we're going to kind of run it back. Of course, we'll put our own little spin on it, but yeah, man, like you said, the runway for Egbuka with Godwin being out until probably October is what's being said. The runway is open for him. He's going at 58th overall now on Underdog, which he's steamed up quite a bit. He was going in the 90s for a while, and just kind of as more news about Chris Godwin comes out, as we see him make these incredible catches during the preseason, like each little data point is all right. He's going up again.
I just checked, and I literally have him at 58th overall in my most recent rankings.
Oh wow!
Just nailed it. One spot ahead of Ricky Pearsall, who has gotten a bunch of buzz. Do you have any thoughts on those two comparatively? Which one are you buying more, the preseason hype?
I think I have Egbuka ranked a little bit higher than Pearsall. I mean, the situation for both of them is pretty good. The my one small concern with Egbuka is he's not a big yak guy, which like you would like to have that out of a guy that's going in this range. Like Ricky Pearsall obviously has that. But if you're just commanding so much volume, like so many targets, which I think Emeka Egbuka will be like a really big target earner, then that doesn't matter as much, right? Like if he's out, if he's getting more targets than Pearsall, then it can kind of even out as far as like the production that you end up with there. My next player is that I'm higher on is Keon Coleman. And it's not like I'm crazy about him now. It's more like I want to make sure that I have a decent amount of Keon Coleman exposure in my best ball portfolio. Like I'd like to be at least at market of 8%, maybe a little bit more. His ADP starting to rise a little bit. Reportedly, looks pretty good in camp. I think the stylistic fit is just so good with Josh Allen for best ball. Like this isn't a guy like there's a chance he could be a weekly starter in managed leagues. I think it's less than 50%, but for best ball, could absolutely see him having really, really big weeks. Was trending in a pretty good way before the wrist injury last season. Buffalo has this everybody eats mantra on offense of, they want to distribute the ball around and all that stuff. But again, I think the stylistic fit with Josh Allen, who does a lot of improvisation, is really good. Of just, okay, the play is breaking down, and now all of a sudden this is backyard football, and we're mailing a piss missile down the field to Keon Coleman, and that's kind of one of the better areas of his game. They are also just a really big red zone threat for Josh Allen. So I think like lower double digits, higher double digits would be crazy. That'd be a real hot take of 80 touchdowns. But I think 10, 11, 12 touchdowns for Keon Coleman could definitely see that in Buffalo this year. What's your temp on Keon Coleman?
Gold. I have a really tough time with Coleman. Just archetypically, like his average depth of target was above 15 yards last year. If I'm curious, have you heard anything about him being used differently? Like maybe Josh Palmer coming in signals that he'll get moved around a little bit more or something?
Well, not specifically about Coleman. Like they do talk about, we like positionless receivers, and they have actually specifically talked about Josh Palmer when they've talked about positionless receivers and what a great fit that they think he is there. Now maybe part of that, why they're saying that, is because they're thinking, well, we're still sticking Keon Coleman at X, so it's important to us to have guys that can play different positions here.
Yeah, the reason I bring up the average depth of target is because I just do not think that he can succeed in this role, especially for fantasy, but probably even for real life, based off everything that Matt Harmon has found in his reception perception charting. Thinks it makes much more sense for him to be a big slot. And I think he could win there consistently with the physicality at the catch point, after the catch. But being asked to do the deep ball stuff, just line up and win against the best corner on the field, does have me nervous about him even being able to succeed as a real life player, let alone for fantasy. For fantasy, it's really, really difficult to have an average depth of target this high and be productive. So over the past 5 seasons, the top fantasy scores on a per game basis are Calvin Ridley at 18.8, Mike Evans at 16.6, Amari Cooper, Tyler Lockett, and Tank Dell at 15. The next highest is 13.2 points per game. So only 5 receivers at 15 points per game or higher out of 47 players here. It's a really high number. And most of the time it's just a list of sacrificial X receivers. With that said, Buffalo is potentially going to be the highest scoring offense in the NFL. That's on the table. And there's tons of ambiguity as to how that's going to come about. And any of these players could, like, for best ball, I think it makes sense because he could just get there in a weird way, even though like this traditionally is not the formula for a good fantasy player. He could just get there through touchdowns or whatever. There probably won't be any predictability on which weeks that will come. But I think, yeah, the improv stuff with Josh Allen could amount to big plays, but it's just this really kind of random bet on that happening, just running hot with variance. And there's plenty of other guys that I think could offer a sort of similar bet that maybe could also step into a role where they're winning routes consistently enough to get like 20% of the targets or whatever. So I never go there with Coleman, but I have heard a lot of analysts that I respect be in on Coleman as a sleeper this year. So I'm willing to like hear it out and consider that I might be wrong. He would have to be an outlier given the role that he's played.
Yeah, when you were talking about, you know, other players who will be on the field a lot and commanding, you know, probably a higher target share. I don't know why. I'm just immediately thinking about like Darnell Mooney in Atlanta, who's going like a round and a half later than Keon Coleman, and seems like he'll get probably a bigger target share than Coleman will, and you know, might be a little bit better bet. Part of it is just the FOMO for me of like knowing that Keon Coleman is like he can provide us these like really, really big weeks. And I don't want to be left without any of him. And he has one of those weeks during the fantasy playoffs, right? Like if he's a low advance player, then that could, I mean, this sounds like Cope, but like it could be an advantage to have a Keon Coleman team that makes it through to, you know, the semifinals or whatever, and like, okay, he's low owned and he hits in a big way. Now I'm at a pretty big advantage in this pod here.
That's awesome. That's a very funny way to think of it. I'm not nearly like best ball brained enough to think that way, but I think what you're saying makes some sense. A very funny and sick comparison I'll give you here from like a player stylistic standpoint. I have Isaac Tesla ranked higher than him, who I think could score points in a very similar manner with the big plays and the touchdowns and a good offense. And maybe he can do more. We don't know, you know, like it's possible that he could, and he could benefit in a freaking huge way if Amon-Ra St. Brown or something got hurt. Whereas like Buffalo, it wouldn't matter really. Like if Shakir got hurt and was out for the whole year, that would matter. But with Tesla, it's like there's paths to him being something enormous. Like he's just a ridiculously talented, gifted athlete, and has looked so good this preseason. And the offense is good. I think Mooney is a really good one as well. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is kind of like that kind of player by the end of the year if he comes back and is healthy. Rashad Bateman is a similar type of player. And like same thing, if Zay Flowers got hurt or something, I do think he would step into more targets than we would ever really see from Keon Coleman. So those are all players who I've ranked higher that score points in a sort of similar way.
I like that. Your next player that you're higher on, Jacob, is Courtland Sutton. Let's hear it.
Yeah, Courtland Sutton is really good. I did this research where I cut out sacks and screens and scrambles. I cut out sacks and scrambles because on those plays there's no target, and I cut out screens because especially for somebody like Sutton, it's relevant because there's tons of, you know, Devon Vele and Marvin Mims and running back screens and crap like that where you're registering a route, but you have no chance of drawing a target. I just think that this could be potentially a good signal of like wide receiver skill. Like when you're lined up as a receiver and just asked to go win, what do you do? I also did it. This makes the sample size a little bit smaller, but it's still a pretty high number. I also did it with plays under center removed because plays under center and play action plays really boost efficiency. Yard per route run efficiency is boosted by like 20, 30% compared to shotgun plays. And so if you look at like with all of those cut out, kind of cut the fat and just look at what receivers did, he was up there with like the best receivers in the league, like top 12 in most per route metrics. And I think that is kind of where he's arrived in his career. If you look at like Ryan Heath's research on age curves and when receivers produce their best seasons, he's right at the end of that, where I think we still have him in his prime with an offense that could be really good. And Bo Nix could take a step forward. Another cool stat here, this is also from Ryan Heath, was that Bo Nix was 33rd in highly accurate throw rate in the first half of the season, but second in highly accurate throw rate over the second half of the season. That's per fantasy points data. I do think we saw him improve in a big way, especially as a deep passer as the year went on, which is of course relevant for Sutton. So as I look at the team now, it's like the offense could be elevated. I think they added some good pieces. RJ Harvey, I'm excited about. Dobbins could be better than the running backs they had last year. And I think Pat Bryant could be better than the receivers that they had last year. And they're apparently going to be playing Marvin Mims more, which Mims is like one of the lowest target per route run players in the NFL if you remove like screens. If it's like just like be a route winner, like he can win some deep routes, but that's basically all we've ever seen him do as a pro. And so to me, that just like shapes up to be like, it's just Sutton. Like Sutton is the clear locked in like first read almost every single play. So I'm like totally fine buying into that. I started the season relatively low on Sutton because he hasn't given us, a bunch of huge seasons or anything. He's not a flashy player. And there's so many receivers to be excited about, year 1, year 2, year 3 guys. But he's just slowly crept up and past so many of these guys. So yeah, he's like a top 40 pick or something like that for me now. I think it just seems like a safe bet that also does have upside if the offense gets better.
Yeah, he's going 47th on Underdog. Just a very boring, unsexy, very productive pick. Sean talking about the wide receivers and that offense. They asked Sean Payton about, hey, who's wide receiver 2? And he's like, well, that's really just a rotation at wide receiver 2. Like you're going to see a bunch of guys just kind of rotate through that role, which is a very big Sean Payton thing. During the preseason, I pointed this out on Twitter that during the preseason, Sean Payton plays his guys in phases, right? He'll play like entire groups. Phase 1, okay, you're out. Next group, phase 2. But during the regular season, he has more of a rotation, or he prefers doing that at least with this personnel that he's had in Denver. And we've seen, the rotation in the backfield. Last year, we've seen the rotation at receiver, but the one real constant is Courtland Sutton. Like Courtland Sutton is always out there. Really great red zone target for Denver. You talked about removing the sacks when you were looking at his numbers. There's probably not a ton of sacks that you had to remove there. That's one of the things that Sean Payton loved about Bo Nix, is that this guy very rarely will give you a negative play. Like he's very good at avoiding sacks, or whether it's escaping or getting the ball out to a receiver, or just throwing the ball away, which is really good for the efficiency of an offense, right? Keeping the offense on the field and moving down the field.
Yeah, that wasn't like designed to make Sutton look good or anything, because like you said, the sacks, there really aren't that many relative to the quarterbacks. There are a lot of scrambles in that offense. But yeah, I just he was one of the guys who stood out the most when I looked at the data. It was like all the guys you'd expect to the top, and I'm like, wow, he's really high.
Mm-hmm. Good, really good player. They gave him some more money to stick around there, and yeah, he's the one piece on this offense that you can feel like pretty good about, right? You know he's going to be on the field a ton. You know that Nix has developed this rapport with him, and when a guy is just being that productive for you, you keep throwing him the ball.
Yeah, and I mentioned that Nix stat. He played way better in the second half. 17.4 PPR points per game for Sutton within that stretch, which is like right at Nico Collins, CeeDee Lamb level last year.
People were laughing at Sean Payton when he took Bo Nix 13th overall, and turns out probably a pretty good pick there. My final player here that I am now higher on is Miami Dolphins receiver Malik Washington, who I like.
I love this.
Yeah, I liked him so much last year. and had a pretty good amount of him in best ball. And we saw him start to come on a little bit more towards the end of the season. And I should have been all over it as soon as they moved Jonnu Smith, because I think he's like a real replacement for Jonnu Smith in this offense. You know, they played Jonnu last year not really as like a true tight end, but more of a third receiver, like a slot receiver for the Dolphins. And we've seen in the preseason this year, Tua targeting the hell out of Malik Washington on plays that look very reminiscent of what we saw from the Mike McDaniel offense last year. And then you have this contingent value of if anything happens to Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill, then you don't even have to worry about, well, how many 3 receiver sets are the Dolphins playing this year, because Malik Washington gets right in there. You have the volatility of Tyreek Hill. You know, who knows if he's going to be there the entire season with Miami, whether it's like a trade or he's just, goes Antonio Brown on us. But I think the genie's kind of out of the bottle with Malik Washington. This guy's really, really good. He's so good with the ball in his hands, which obviously we see him, returning kicks, and that shows, okay, this guy has like really good vision. He's good with the ball in his hands. And then he's just a really good receiver. And I think in a Miami offense where we're expecting probably a lot of kind of quick game, I think he could be really productive. And this is a guy who's going 204 overall on Underdog. I just wish I'd been hitting it much, much sooner. Again, back when Jonnu Smith was traded, I think was the time to realize that Malik Washington could be a big piece of the offense this year.
Yeah, I guess the genie is out of the bottle compared to that, because I was saying that when it happened. I was like, I think this is Malik Washington's season, baby. And like nobody cared at all. But still, like nobody really cares outside of maybe like the deepest stuff you're doing, like Underdog. Like you can maybe find him in dynasty leagues available. It's insane to me. And then redraft leagues, he's free. Yeah, I love this call. He accounted for 39% of his team's receiving yards when on the field at the collegiate level, which was like the highest in his class, above Malik Neighbors, above Marvin Harrison Jr., above, Luther Burden, Travis Hunter, any of the guys from this year's class outside of Elika Yamanor, Ao Manor, I think is how you're supposed to say that. Actually, I only watch their all 22, so I always just absolutely butcher their names at the beginning of the year. But Ao Manor played in a just awful offense. Malik Washington was just like that guy. I think like they featured him for a reason, and he can do all the catch and run stuff like John, but I also do think he won down the field a lot more than people realize. He had a higher PFF grade than anybody other than Malik Neighbors from that 23 rookie class. And that was because he was doing a lot more than just like getting just Wan'Dale Robinson stuff or whatever. So yeah, he's a really fun, intriguing one to keep an eye on, because if something were to happen to Tyreek or whatever, I think he could really surprise people.
Yeah, I've been jamming him in as much as I can in drafts on Underdog now. I have, I think, like 13 Best Ball Mania drafts left, and lately it's been a lot of Malik Washington there. Final player that we are higher on, guy for you, is Chase Brown.
Yeah, I'm a sick pup. I was too low on Chase Brown because I was enamored with Taj Brooks, their round 6 running back. And I really was convinced that he was going to like come in and take work, which maybe he does as the year goes on. The jury is still out on whether Chase Brown can be a successful runner down to down. And it's kind of the Kenneth Walker profile. Like, can he do that? I think in that regard, he's looked great this preseason. He's looked decisive and strong and hit the hole hard. And you love to see it for fantasy purposes. So I've tried to, reconcile that too low ranking. And I've got him now as basically an end of the round 2 pick, right in the same range as Bucky Irving, who's one of my favorite players in the league. Chase Brown, it's just usage. It's just absolutely ridiculous usage. The Fantasy Points data suite has a proprietary XFP model, expected fantasy points. It's based on where every touch came. So like not every target is the same. And Chase Brown his number was 22.4 per game when he became the starter. So week 9 on, it's a relatively small, or it is a relatively small sample size, but it's like half the season at least. No running back has been above 20 other than Christian McCaffrey in the 5 years that they have that data available. So 22.4 is really freaking high. I gave the percentage of running back runs in reference to Devon Achane earlier. He was at 53%, I think. Chase Brown, even though he was only the starter for half of the season, his rate was 69%, which was 8th highest in the league. When he became the starter, it was all the way up to 84%. For reference, Derrick Henry was the only player above 80% last year at 82%. So obviously the targets is what's really exciting for fantasy, but also there's this potential where they just like gave everything to him. The offense is great, and he's an explosive player. So it's just an easy pick, I feel like.
Yeah, once he became the full blown just workhorse there, getting those, about 5 targets a game, so big for any PPR format. Was getting a ton of opportunities, and then the Coachspeak has just been phenomenal on him this season. It's very clear that he's going to be a huge part of their offense. Again, head coach Zach Taylor on June 12th said, quote, he's done a great job edging in there with a ton of great playmakers on offense and making himself a priority. Like, we got to get this guy the ball in as many ways as possible. And you say that with all the other weapons we already have. And so that's just a credit to him to find his niche and force us to have to give him the ball as many times as possible, end quote. And then offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher on July 23rd said, quote, I think Chase Brown is going to, by the end of the season, be a household name, end quote. And also said, quote, he's everything that Austin Eckler was. I think that by the time the season's over, you'll all know who he is. And he is in this offense where teams just cannot stack the box against Cincinnati. Like, you're just asking to give up a 75-yard touchdown to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. If you do that, defenses have to respect this pass game so much with those two, and Burrow and Gesicki and Joseph to some extent. But Dan Pitcher, their offensive coordinator, said that, hey, like if teams want to like play back on us and just defend the pass, then we'll just hand the ball off to Chase Brown. He's a very explosive back, and we'll just like crush them against light boxes. And then if they want to come in on us when we're handing the ball off, obviously we're gonna toast you downfield. But then all the pass catching stuff, right? Even if he's like, there are these backs where, okay, you're first and second down back, another back is going to be in the game on third down, and they're more of like the pass catching back. So we'll see Samaje Perine on a good deal of third downs. Most likely, it's always been like kind of a Zach Taylor thing of like, I prefer to have a different back on third downs. They did that with Joe Mixon when Mixon was there. Their offensive coordinator at the time, Brian Callahan, was saying like, I would like Joe Mixon to be on the field on every down. And Zach Taylor was like, well, I would actually like Joe Mixon to be off the field on third down and have Samaje Perine in there. Samaje Perine, by the way, not quite the player that he was the last time that he was in Cincinnati. Didn't look great last year in Kansas City when he was occupying a third down back role for them at times. Now maybe it's just going there in the middle of the season and not quite adjusted to the offense, and he's more familiar with the Zach Taylor offense in Cincinnati. But the very long point that I'm trying to make here is that, Chase Brown, even if he is a first and second down guy, he's a first and second down guy who can catch the ball. And, he's going to command his share of targets just like he did in 2024. Has an ADP of 19th overall. Now he's really, really shooting up these draft boards as people are now just now coming around to the fact that, oh, he's going to be kind of a workhorse for Cincinnati, which they have been saying for months and months and months. And for some reason, people during the summer were scared that, oh, well, Zach Moss is going to eat into that role, when the coaching staff had made like no real mention of Zach Moss until they like grouped him saying like Zach Moss and the other guys, right? Like he was part of the other guys. They said Chase Brown's our guy. We brought Taj Brooks in. We like Taj Brooks. We have Samaje Perine in here now. And then you have the other guys with Zach Moss, and they end up cutting Zach Moss. But this is an offense who is going to score a ton of points, like most likely the highest scoring offense this season, in part because this defense on paper is really, really, really bad. And they'll probably have to be chasing points or putting up enough points there to keep pace with the defense. Yeah, I'm very, very in on Chase Brown this year.
It was Taj Brooks for me because I thought he could have that pass blocking role and then be a really reliable, get what the offense needs, high success rate guy, and just be a compliment to Brown where they're like interested. And it's like, okay. And like he just starts getting more and more work and then eventually is a thorn in the side. And I still think that could happen. They really did prioritize him a lot this preseason. It felt like trying to get him work. He even he ran with the starters a little bit when they took Chase Brown out. But in terms of the role, the insulation that we seem to have here with Brown, I think it's hard to go wrong with it outside of that like unlikely thing that I just mentioned happening. And to your point about the early downs, Joe Mixon has been like one of the 3 or 4 highest XFP players, expected fantasy points, in the NFL on that Bengals team. It didn't really matter that he was giving up that third down work to Travion Williams. I'm blanking on that guy's name. Whoever it was, it really just didn't matter, like those aren't really valuable plays. If you look at first and second down targets last year, Chase Brown had 54 on just first and second downs. That was the 5th highest in the league. From week 9 on, when he became the starter, only Devon Achane had more first and second down targets. That's when he makes his money. You don't get fantasy points for blocking.
It's a really interesting case with Chase Brown too, because I think he's such a great pick in like redraft and best ball and everything like that. I'm not as high on him for dynasty because I don't think he is just this outstanding running back. I think he's like a pretty good running back who's in an incredible situation, like a really fantastic offense, and then a coaching staff who wants to use him quite a bit. All right, let's get to a few players that we are lower on here. I'll start us off, and this is a guy who was actually on both of our lists. This is a guy we were higher on earlier in the draft season, and we're not so hot on them anymore. My first guy is Pittsburgh Steelers rookie running back Kaleb Johnson. And I'm actually still having a little bit of a problem here. Like the ADP has dropped to a point, he's going 80th overall. It's dropped to a point where I'm like, am I back in at this price? Like, okay, I'll probably still take Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason over Kaleb Johnson, but I am still kind of interested in him. When the Steelers drafted him and they were asked about the vision for him, and they just kept saying volume runner. And they were also in these pressers with Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, and the head coach Mike Tomlin, kept talking about their need for explosive plays. Like, we did not get explosive plays in the run game last season. We've not been getting that. This is something that we covet. This is something we really want in the running game. And we think that Kaleb Johnson will provide that to us. I don't view Kaleb Johnson as like the super explosive runner, at least not kind of like short area. He's more like a train that needs to really get going, and then it's like, okay, this is a big horse galloping down the straights now. The third down stuff is a concern. The pass catching stuff is a concern when we're talking about PPR formats. It was pretty clear when they drafted him, while they were talking about him as a volume runner, at the same time, the things that they were saying about, his pass protection and ability to play on third down made you think, okay, they have zero plans for this guy to be anything other than a first and second down grinder for them. please, Jacob, tell me your Kaleb Johnson case here.
I think you hit it on the head. I think your description of him as a runner is perfect. His man, like trying to watch him as he attempted to like navigate traffic was really rough in terms of his Iowa film. But if you get him out the outside to get him going with some space, it takes him a second to get there. But once he's going, like it is a pretty unique mover at that size, and definitely a challenge for smaller tacklers to try to bring down. So there were a lot of long runs on his Iowa film. Like I was not expecting it because all I knew about him going in was the 40 time. I knew that people were like freaking out over that. And then I watched him like, this guy's definitely fast. Like he's definitely fast to run away from people. He does it all the time. So yeah, I didn't love his film. His data was sort of sus as well, but it was hard to compare to the rest of the class because Iowa plays completely different brand of football there. So people are uploading the box all the time, which the other running backs, almost all of them, don't have to deal with. And so I looked at him and I was like, if he doesn't land in like an outside zone scheme fit, I'm like all the way out. And then it's like Pittsburgh, like easy, obvious spot for him to land in. Exactly what Arthur Smith wants to do. And so I was like tentatively in because I felt like they drafted him to kind of be the offensive engine, and that could work for them if the blocking is better, which it could be. There's definitely some question marks there, but if the blocking is better, if Arthur Smith's scheme works, which it often does, then it could be like an 80% of Derrick Henry kind of thing, where even though the team's not that good, they can just run it through this guy over and over and over. And that was intriguing enough in like round 7 or 8 or whatever, that like sometimes I would click him early on in the offseason. But man, lately, the more that I think about it, it's just like, I'm good. I don't want any part of this, like potentially 3-way backfield with Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren's a really, really good player. Have like the utmost respect for that guy. And Arthur Smith is involved, and Aaron Rodgers is involved. Like, no, I just don't want any of that. Like, what's the upside case that the team is middle of the pack? They win 9 games, 10 games, and Kaleb happens to score like 10 of the 12 or 14 rushing touchdowns, and he's like a low end RB2 or maybe a mid range RB2. Like, great. I just can't go there with him now.
Yeah, the things that do kind of attract me to making that pick, like you mentioned, is the outside zone run scheme that Pittsburgh likes running, and that fits Kaleb Johnson so well. And then talking about how the vision for him is this first or is this volume runner for them, and Mike Tomlin saying like it was a very easy evaluation for us, seems to kind of fulfill the type of back that they had wished that Najee Harris was for them. And again, good speed when he's able to get to the second and third level. And they have upgraded or invested at least in that offensive line. We know Arthur Smith would love to run the ball, but as you point out, Aaron Rodgers being a part of this offense, I think puts a little bit of a damper on how much Kaleb Johnson might see the field. And then even when they get down near the goal line, which should be kind of, Kaleb Johnson, bread and butter, just big hulking back. Well, we know Aaron Rodgers' history of hey, it's Aaron Rodgers time once we get to the 1 or 2 yard line. Time to throw a little fade or slant or out to Devontae Adams or whoever his preferred receiver is. Next guy that you've got is Tre Harris.
This one makes me really sad. I loved Tre Harris as an idea. As I've watched him this preseason, it doesn't really feel like he's part of the team's plan. I feel like it's just been weird with the Chargers and the wide receiver plan, it feels like. So they had Mike Williams, and I think they wanted him to be the X. And so they were moving Tre Harris around from like what I've heard from beat reporters and camp and stuff. They're moving around a lot more, not necessarily just like having him outside of the X, which is what he did at Ole Miss. And I thought is something he could do at a high level as a pro. That was the role they had like Quentin Johnson fill a lot last year. And there were a lot of just like backside plays where Herbert works his way through the progression and just finds Johnson open for an easy score because everybody's terrified of Lad McConkey. And so the idea of like Tre Harris being able to fill that X role with McConkey scaring defenses, with Amari and Hampton scaring defenses in this play action game where Herbert can drop back, and if McConkey's not there, then he has Tre Harris just in a one-on-one down the field. He can win those one-on-ones all the time. And so that was enticing to me as a late round pick, just ridiculously productive on a per route basis in college, like unlike anything we've really seen recently. But if he's in this Z mover role, how the hell does he get on the field? Like he's not. It's McConkey and Keenan Allen now both kind of blocking that spot. When Quentin Johnson had the concussion in the preseason game, it was Keandre Lambert-Smith that stepped in and played that X role with the starters. Herbert, gave him 2 deep targets. Like it's like good vibes between them. And Tre Harris then came in and lit up the backups. But like, it's almost if he doesn't have that X role, I literally don't know how he gets on the field. And so I'm worried that he's just kind of completely irrelevant this year, which sucks because I felt like he could have been something really, really fun this year. And on top of all of it, you have the Rashawn Slater injury. So that just gives me pause with like investing in the offense at all, since it's already a run first, like low pass volume offense. So yeah, sad. I have a lot of Tre Harris exposure in Dynasty and thought that he could be a sneaky, fun late round pick for redraft. But at this point, I think I would draft KLS ahead of him.
Yeah, I put in the Coachspeak Index Discord, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, from a it was either Jim Harbaugh or a Greg Roman presser. I think it was a Greg Roman press conference where they asked about where these players are playing and learning the position. And yeah, they said Tre Harris, we've started him out at Z, which is not what you want to hear. You wanted him to be training at X receiver, like you pointed out. He's now going about 4 rounds later than he was originally on Underdog, was going in kind of the early 100s, and now he has an ADP of 153. Keenan Allen just further complicates matters in this offense. I talked with Ben Gretsch on a podcast that we did on players that were trying to figure out about Keenan Allen. I'm not sure he plays the number of snaps that everyone is thinking. He'll be this full-time starter, always on the field kind of thing. He's going at, I think, like 122 overall on Underdog, which I think is a little too expensive for him. But he is going to be on the field, and him coming to LA was pretty bad for Tre Harris. And then the KLS blow up is also pretty bad for Tre Harris. So things have trended down in a big way. I also had a good deal of Tre Harris that I was taking earlier in the draft season, and I'm kind of beyond that at this point. My next player that I am a little bit lower on now, pains me to say this, it's Chris Olave, who I think is a really, really outstanding receiver. A couple problems for me here. He's going 68th overall, and I mean, I think this could end up being one of the worst offenses that we've ever seen. This New Orleans Saints offense with Spencer Rattler is QB1. We'll see how long that lasts. If he cedes that role, it's going to be Tyler Shuck coming in, who didn't exactly light things up in the preseason. Seems to still kind of have this problem of either giving up on plays way too early or way too late, which is not good for an offense. You're going to find yourself in a lot of like second and third and longs in this kind of play style that he was showing us. Rattler was really bad last season. It didn't, I mean, okay-ish during the preseason, but yeah, he's such a good player, Chris Olave, but there are also some other really, really good players going around him. Egbuka has passed him up at this point. But there are guys like Ricky Pearsall in this range, Deebo Samuel, who I think is in a really nice spot with Washington, and it's just hard for me to take Chris Olave now over these guys who are in actually productive offenses, like good offenses. Like who knows how many touchdowns the New Orleans Saints will score this year? They'll probably be like right at the bottom of the league. So there's a while where Chris Olave is on the board, in this range, that absolutely it's Chris Olave time in the mid 60s, and I just can't get there anymore. Do you have any feelings on him?
Yeah, I love Chris Olave. I am a firm believer in the talent. I am comfortable betting on him, and I still have him ranked high. Like as you're mentioning it, and we're thinking about it, Ricky Pearsall feels better than him right now. There's no way around it. There's definitely more touchdown upside, and so much of my strategy is like based around trying to find as much upside as I can with every pick. So like, why do I have Olave higher? I just think that there's a framework for Olave to have a 28% target share kind of season that no one else in this range can come close to. We're talking about Terry McLaurin, Jalen Waddle, Emeka Egbuka, Ricky Pearsall, Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams. None of those guys are sniffing that. Like maybe Pearsall sneaks up into that range if it's Sky Moore as his wide receiver too. But I still think the highest he's getting is like 24, 25%. Olave can like be that kind of a player. It's possible that we just get, I mean, he's been amazing since he came in. He was a like more productive receiver than Garrett Wilson earlier in the career, and he got kind of reverted into this deep ball role. But like this guy's been phenomenal, like every step along the way, and he's entering, what is typically one of the most productive years of a wide receiver's career. Of course, I'm worried about the team level stuff, but Kellen Moore, I do think could boost things. He likes to play extremely fast, and there's potential that we see him get really creative with the way that he uses Olave. To me, it makes more sense that it would be him than Rashid Shaheed, to be doing the over the middle, horizontally breaking, pre-snap motion type of stuff that Kellen Moore has used to really boost Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb, and then Devontae Smith a little bit last year. Last year, we saw Kellen Moore didn't focus on just one guy. It was a lot of guys doing this kind of stuff. And so maybe that's where we are with New Orleans. This is not just Olave. But if a number of these things align, then I do think there could be a path to upside, even if he doesn't have more than like 6-7 touchdowns. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to look at the guys ahead of him, and it's like, is there anyone else who I feel so concerned with their touchdown upside? And the guys that are coming to mind are like Zay Flowers, Garrett Wilson, maybe Travis Hunter, Tedero McMillan. But most of the other players, maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba, most of the other players, is like, he could easily get 10 touchdowns. That wouldn't shock me. It would shock us if Olave came near that. So I get it. I get the concern. But I remain steadfast in my belief in the guy. And I think he gives you a really solid floor. But then again, I guess it's any given play for him, which is what people are going to say. That's what everybody gravitates towards right now, is that fear. So yeah, I actually have landed him a lot in any drafts where I need to fill a receiver spot. It often ends up being him because nobody wants to pick him.
All right, I'm back in on Chris Olave. Yeah. So the thing with Philly's offense, he's the offensive coordinator there, but Nick Sirianni was very, very big on our passing offenses, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and whenever a guy was not getting a good amount of targets in a game, or a stretch of 2 games, then immediately Sirianni would make sure that the other guy is taken care of. They obviously had to manage the AJ Brown ego a little bit there in New Orleans. Now Kellen Moore has talked up how incredible he thinks Chris Olave is. They have Kellen Moore has talked a lot about moving Chris Olave around, which as you're saying, could be really, really good for him to not just get some deep hospital balls from Spencer Rattler, but intermediate hospital balls from Spencer Rattler. Yeah, sometimes you just have to bet on talent. It's not like the Saints are going to pass for less than 2,500 receiving.
Right. Like
hopefully.
basically every offense produces at least like 3K, So if he gets like 33% of that receiving yardage, like that's a good year. It's a small sample size stat, but on pre-snap motion routes, he has the highest yard per route run rate of any receiver since he's entered the NFL. So it could be a big factor for him to get more of that type of involvement. I do think that like McMillan and Hunter are, and maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba are honestly like kind of good comparisons for where their points are going to come. I don't know about Jason so much because I think Olave could have a way higher route total. I think Jason has to get there with like massive efficiency, where Olave it's more of a volume bet. But like Hunter and T-Mac, it's like we feel more confident in their quarterback situation there, but both quarterbacks have questions for sure. And so it's like, is he a worse player than those two? I would not think so. In year 4, like I would think there's a decent chance he's better than both of those guys are as rookies.
Mm-hmm. You convinced me. Let's fire up a draft right now. Next guy here for you, Jacob, is, man, this hurts me because this is one of my flag plants. It's Luther Burden.
I'm ready to be just completely wrong on this. But I do think Ben Johnson is like the ultimate hardo, and he's like all in on this Olamide Zaccheaus stuff. And Kaleb seems to be as well. So I think that's going to be a thing. Eventually, Burden should overtake him, right? Like he's really talented. I don't know what the hell to make of what I'm watching this preseason with the Bears. Like him and Colston Loveland both look like they're like stuck in sand. They are just not. Burden had one play where he looked really good with the ball in his hands. They got him out on the right sideline. It's like, okay, there he is. But like on the routes, it's like, it's kind of similar to what I saw at Mizzou, where it's like a lot of these downfield routes where he needs to like find space or find some kind of separation in zone. He's not settling into any area. He just kind of like runs through and just lets the play die. And it's like, the play's still going. Like we need you to like give us an option if need be. And then also he hasn't been separating versus man, which you don't get a ton of man coverage looks in the preseason. But when he's faced man coverage in the preseason, it's been a bunch of using his body and physicality, which he's a bigger, stronger guy than people realize. So it's been good to see him like out there looking like that kind of athlete, but he hasn't looked like, so I was hoping to watch him this preseason and be convinced that yes, this guy is an overwhelmingly talented player. And I haven't felt that way. And so then when it gets to all the team level stuff that scares me too, Kaleb might freaking suck. I don't know, but like he was the worst quarterback last year in terms of accuracy. And that's like all charted data. This isn't just like my opinion. Anthony Richardson was the only one that was worse in terms of accuracy. And you can blame that on all the circumstantial stuff, whatever, we'll see. I have no reason to be negative against Kaleb. It's just like when I watch the guy, like it inspires no confidence that things are going to be better this preseason. And when I watched all his film last year, it was like abysmally bad. And I was listening to Robert Mays talk to the Chicago beat writer, and he's like, what is kind of worrying me about like Kaleb is that he's looked less accurate than he did this time last year during practice. And I'm like, what? Wow. What are we talking about? I don't know, man. Like that's it. Just I want to be in on Ben Johnson. I want to be in on this offense, but we're talking about a guy who, like, at best is probably the third or fourth option on the team. But there is upside if the offense is good. If Kaleb is good, obviously he has all the talent to be good. There's target ambiguity. There's no clear-cut wide receiver one. I think it's going to be Rome Odunze based off the vibes, but there's no clear-cut like design target guy, someone who can take 25% of the targets. So like maybe Burden could work his way into that kind of a substantial role, in which case he has as much upside as basically anybody we've talked about today, like more upside than probably Matthew Golden if he gets into that kind of a role. So I get it, but there's a lot of other late round guys that I feel like have a chance to play early on. And I would rather kind of like see if they do something early on. If they don't, I can just drop them. Whereas Burden, it's like, it's different for basketball, of course, but for like managed leagues, it's like, what? I just have to hold him and wait till he gets the role. And then what? What if Caleb's playing like shit? Like, then what are we doing here? Like I'm just going to waste like 8 weeks holding this guy. I have a really tough time with him.
Yeah, could definitely be a roster clogger for a big part of the season. If you're in a league with a shorter bench, he is going so late on, in several sites. I'm sure in home leagues as well. He's probably going pretty late. Everybody overreacting a little bit to the Olamide Zaccheaus, or maybe reacting appropriately to the Zaccheaus stuff. But what I just keep coming back to is Ben Johnson saying, listen, wherever I've been, the slot receiver has been a focal point of my offense. Mm-hmm. And then thinking, okay, is Luther Burden a better talent than Olamide Zaccheaus? I believe so. I think the what you're mentioning about, these rookies looking a little bit like they're running in quicksand. Well, they've also missed, part of training camp, so they're a little bit later getting up to speed on stuff. Luther Burden a little bit behind Loveland in that area as well. They have been pretty straightforward the way that they've talked about players, and specifically about Luther Burden. Earlier in the offseason, it was yeah, man, he's missing some time. This guy has fallen behind here. And lately it's been, okay, Luther Burden is now making strides, and he's headed in a pretty good direction. We saw these like big crackback blocks that he had at the goal line during the preseason, one of the preseason games, and general manager Ryan Poles was on the broadcast that night, and they asked him about that, and he said, yeah, we were not seeing that earlier, in OTAs and in training camp, and now this is something that Luther Burden is doing. And with the level of hard ass that Ben Johnson is, that's so big. And he's mentioned how like what you're doing when you don't have the ball in your hands is going to determine how much you are on the field for me. So seeing him make those strides, I think is a good sign. It could take a while. I definitely don't expect it to be at the very beginning of the season, but as you laid out, it's maybe one of the biggest upside bets that we can make for a guy that's going kind of mid 10th round on Underdog at 113 overall. At some places he's falling to like the 140s in home leagues. I'm sure he's going pretty late as well. In auction leagues, I bet you could get him pretty cheaply. And it's a bet that, it's probably not gonna work out. Okay, I'll be honest. He's a flag plant for me. I realize it's probably not gonna work out, but on the whatever the odds are, 20%, 30, 35% that it does work out, you are getting such a huge hit as the slot receiver in this Ben Johnson offense. And Ben Johnson talking about our focus for Caleb Williams is 70% completion percentage, which means we are not throwing the ball downfield as much as he was doing last year with all those missed shots downfield to Roman Dunze. We're going to focus on getting the ball out quickly to playmakers. So we spent the 10th overall pick on Colston Loveland. We spent the 39th overall pick on Luther Burden. And that just shows you kind of the blueprint that Chicago has in mind for this offense is very quick hitting stuff to playmakers. And they've been talking about it throughout their press conferences is we have a ton of playmakers, and they love the playmaking ability that Luther Burden brings to the table there. So, when I'm drafting at volume on Underdog, I want to make sure I have a decent percentage of Luther Burden because if he does hit and I'm getting him in the 10th, 11th, 12th round when he's falling there, then that's just a really, really big piece to have as like a wide receiver 5 on my team that is now this super productive slot receiver for Ben Johnson.
I like it. I'm going to take all those quotes, though, as Colston Loveland quotes.
Another guy who's incredible with Yak and could absolutely like it doesn't. I don't think it has to be one guy occupying the slot there. It happened in Detroit with Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously, but it could be a mixture of guys. It could be, Colston Loveland, whether it's like 11 or 12 personnel, right? They have Cole Kmet out there, and Loveland is occupying they have him out as like a further slot, or in 11 personnel and having him be the slot there. Obviously, Luther Burden. I'm fine making that bet. I want to be reasonable with it. I don't want 35% Luther Burden, but 15%, maybe 20%, and then halfway through the season, he's kind of on track, got it figured out in a piece of that offense. That would be pretty nice to have. Final player here. This is a guy that I've nominated. It's Kyler Murray, going 98th overall on Underdog. At one point, I think I was up to about 17% exposure earlier in the season. Some of that was, I was taking a decent amount of Trey McBride and pairing up Kyler Murray with him, but I think I've lost a little bit of faith that we've all had in Kyler Murray and in Drew Petzing. As far as the passing offense in Arizona, I think he's very good when it comes to the run offense there. But this is a guy who we keep wanting to see, like, okay, this is the year that he's going to go back to using his legs, right? Jonathan Gannon, their head coach, was asked about that, and he didn't give like confirmation. He in fact, his answer led me to believe that he doesn't care as much about using Kyler Murray's legs. Offensive coordinator Drew Petzing has talked about more of just like, okay, rolling him out on these bootleg plays and trying to get stuff downfield. It's a little bit high risk, high reward, but we think Kyler Murray can do that. There have been stretches of time where Kyler Murray plays really, really well, and I think back to several seasons ago where just a really torrid pace to start out. I think that was before actually Gannon got there, but it looked like, oh shit, Kyler Murray might win MVP this season. I'm not quite a believer in Drew Petzing when it comes to the passing offense. I'm not sure we're going to see the rushing from Kyler Murray that we want to see. We got this weird quote from Brian Schottenheimer, who, I mean, it's very rare that an NFL head coach will talk about another team's player in kind of a disparaging way, like in a negative light. And he said, oh yeah, my offensive coordinator, Clayton Adams, who, came from Arizona, Clayton Adams told me that Kyler Murray doesn't really like to run, which is like a wild quote to put out there. Brian Schottenheimer often saying things that maybe should not be said.
Kind of told me that Kyler Murray's a big wuss.
Yeah.
What?
But people made fun of the whole clause that Arizona tried to put into Kyler Murray's contract of you need to be on your iPad studying this amount of hours per week, and it was a fun thing to laugh at, and then we just kind of forgot about it and wrote it off. But I think we should maybe pay attention to that a little bit when you feel so compelled that you have to put that kind of language in a contract that, like, we know you were not putting in the necessary work. So we're going to have to legally stipulate that for you. It signals to me that maybe you're not 100% as locked in as you need to be as a leader and as an NFL quarterback. Do you have any thoughts on Kyler Murray?
Super weird. Yeah. For fantasy, Kyler Murray had the fewest fantasy points per game of his career last year. I think that went a little overlooked because he played his full 17 games, which he's never done. But yeah, this guy's been falling off. He really had 2 seasons, year 2 and year 3. He was remarkably productive on a per game basis. And that's because he had a lot more designed runs. His fantasy point per dropback rate was much higher in those seasons. It was like 25% above league average or something like that. Last year he was QB 13 in fantasy points per dropback. So that's a really predictive stat year over year. And it's relevant for him because he had a bunch of dropbacks last year, over 600. As I look at this Cardinals team, they really addressed defense, offensive line. I think they're just going to try to run the ball down people's throats. That's what they've talked about, right? Like they're going to try to use Trey Benson more. James Conner's their guy, of course. He's the engine. I don't know, man. When I look at this Cardinals team, I'm like, everything about this team is awesome. The coaching is awesome on defense and the designs of the run game. I think people are kind of ridiculous with the way that they talk about Drew Petzing. Like just real easy stat on that. Marvin Harrison Jr. had, I think, the 3rd highest win rate on dig routes last year, and he was targeted on 10% of those dig routes. That's a Kyler Murray stat. He clearly struggles with the vision when it comes to that area of the field. It is what it is. We don't even make jokes about it. It just is what it is. That's Drew Petzing. Like he was getting him the 3rd highest rate of horizontally breaking routes off of play action, which are extreme efficiency boosters, belonged to Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. People are like, why is he only doing downfield stuff? That's what was happening out the gate, but like they integrated more and more nuance to his route tree as the year went on, which is what you'd expect for a year 1 receiver. I think like clearly everything is in place and Kyler is limiting. So like my hot take is like trade Kyler to the Saints or something after this year, like draft a quarterback, move on. Everything else is awesome here. I definitely am not drafting him in fantasy where he goes. There's a lot of late round quarterbacks I like. I would so much rather have Drake May, who has like actual rushing upside. Drake May had more rushing than him, last year on a per opportunity basis with no design running. His team intentionally limiting his running because they didn't want him to get hurt in a lost season. That could change in a huge way. Like it's kind of, I don't know. People have this idea of what Kyler is in their mind. And he hasn't been that for fantasy in a long time. And then there is the injury risk too.
Yeah. Very, very well said. Jacob, this was a great episode. If I do say so myself, and I will say so, and really loved having this conversation with you on these players that we have changed our minds on. Please let us know what you've got going on, where we can find you.
Yeah, this was a super fun episode. Love to get into some sicko topics like Tre Harris and Malik Washington and everything here. So if you want more of that, Ollie Gordon, Braelon Allen, all those shout outs. I write a newsletter. It's called the FFT newsletter. If you Google FFT newsletter with my name, you'll find it. It's the fantasy football one. If that's unclear, as you look at the different newsletters there, it's not, baseball or whatever. It's fantasy football today. That will deliver to your inbox for free. Lots of good stuff coming out during the season. Also do a podcast. It's called Beyond the Box Score. That's also on the FFT channel. Do that with my buddy Dan Schneier, my co-host, and it's awesome. It's a great podcast. You should definitely check it out if you like this kind of content.
All right, absolutely, honestly, truthfully, one of my favorite follows on Twitter. You're crushing it, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for
right
coming on. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, and thanks to everyone for listening. We'll see you soon. All right. Peace.